Hey, I'm Warren Sprouse. You're on the Bible Forum. We're here every Sunday night from 8 to 10 p.m. Love for you to join us live. You can't, I understand that. We've got a lot of things that we can do to make sure you get the information. And if you're watching this in a podcast or listening in a podcast or watching in a video or on the Facebook or whatever, you see how it works. I want to talk to you a little bit about Israel. With all that's currently happening in Israel, our State Department has decided that we need to tell the world what's really going on. Well, in a word, Israel. That's what's going on in the Middle East. That's what is going on in this whole thing with the Temple Mount and all the rest of it. They point to the fact that Israel is somehow doing something to stimulate all of this. But it isn't really true. If you've been watching at all, you have seen how enraged the Muslim community gets when Israel actually steps up and does the job they've been asked or given responsibility to do by the United Nations. There was shooting on the Temple Mount. People died. Even the perpetrators ended up dying. And they shut it down for 3 days while they searched to make sure there wasn't anything else there, because these guys hid the weapons on the Temple Mount and walked in and, everything was cool, and then they went and got, so they had to go. That you would have thought was the end of the world. And then they put in metal detectors. And everybody in the area screamed bloody murder. They took them out. And then you say, well, everything's okay. No. This Friday, they had problems again. And the Arab world is now paying attention that Israel can come in and take control. They don't like that. Turkey is encouraging their people to go to Israel and make a statement, a stand against what's going on. Not that their people are coming on to Temple Mount and killing other people, but that Israel is somehow becoming a problem. Our State Department, in making their country-by-country report on terrorism, pointed to Israel as the problem. How do they get there? They say that Palestinian calls for terrorism are rare. That's their words. That the Palestinian Authority has taken significant steps during President Abbas's, that's the Palestinian President Abbas's tenure. He's been the president since 2005, to ensure that official institutions in the West Bank under its control do not create or disseminate content that incites violence. But mostly, they say the lack of hope that's being created by Israeli policies is what's stimulating the problem over there. The salient issues seem to revolve around the Israeli settlement construction going on in the West Bank. The West Bank is disputed territory. That's the area between Jerusalem and the Jordan border. Jordan says that's ours. Well, Israel is building big apartment complexes for Jews. And of course you can understand they're not happy about that. The perception is that the Israeli government is somehow changing the status quo on the Temple Mount in terms of that issue. The Israeli Defense Force tactics, which Palestinians consider to be aggressive, the fact that they have people walking up to total strangers who are just shopping on the street and taking out a knife and hacking off their head, doesn't seem to be aggressive. The fact that the IDF, the Defense Forces, have only been aggressive for the last couple of weeks doesn't seem to factor in. So as much as everything changes, nothing changes. The Israeli cabinet has decided to remove the metal detectors from the Temple Mount. They call it the lesser of two evils. I call it capitulation to chaos. Turkish President Erdogan is urging Muslims to visit and protect Jerusalem after the violence broke out over those metal detectors. Saying, quote, "From here I make a call to all Muslims. Anyone who has the opportunity should visit Jerusalem, should visit the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Come, let us all protect Jerusalem." Jerusalem doesn't belong to them. Then there's the slap in Jordan's face from a Palestinian official who said Jordan did not consult with the Palestinian Authority in their talks with Israel, talks that led to the removal of the metal detectors. The Palestinian official said it was Israel that informed their Minister of Civil Affairs of the intention to remove the detectors and security cameras from the area. They're upset with Jordan. You just don't want to get in the middle of these people. An Egyptian-born American preacher by the name of Amar Shaheen gave a sermon at the Islamic Center in Davis, California, a week ago Friday. In his July 21st lecture posted on the Davis Mahid YouTube channel, this Muslim preacher, speaking in both English and Arabic about how all Muslims, not only Palestinians or Syrians, will be called upon to kill all the Jews on the last day. When is this last day? It's what we call the Great Tribulation, we Christians. A time when Israel will be under tremendous pressure, and presumably the West will be helping her fend off Muslim invaders. It would appear the Antichrist, who will have established his throne in Jerusalem at that time, will be leading the fight against these attackers. The Bible says that only 1/3 of all living Jews will survive the Great Tribulation, which is less than 7 years in length. In a video translated by the Middle East Media Research Institute, Shaheen also stressed that the Hadith, the oral tradition of sayings attributed to the Prophet of Islam, does not say where the final battle will take place. He says if it is in Palestine, for example, or another place, hinting at the possibility that such a battle could happen in the United States or Europe as well. He prayed that Al-Aqsa Mosque would be liberated from the filth of the Jews. In other news, newly built Iranian missile factories in Lebanon are now capable of producing powerful weapons for Hezbollah. And they are part of a wider trend that could set the region on fire. All of this according to a senior former Israeli defense source, saying there is no doubt that this is a new and very dangerous stage. He said that Iran has, for the first time, placed military production industries directly in Hezbollah's possession. Now, all of this implies that Lebanon is not really a state, but a branch of Iran that is controlled by Hezbollah, and that Iran, after a nuclear agreement, feels that it can do anything and everything because nobody dares harm them. That, according to a Middle Eastern source. Of course, our government just this week slapped an injunction on Iran. We'll see how all that plays out. Oh, by the way, as an aside, our government just sanctioned Russia for its part in our election, whatever that might have been. And today, the president of Russia announced that I think all 450 American politicians, what are they, emissaries and ambassadors and employees that got to get out. Yeah, they're playing. Tehran's alliance with Moscow gives the Islamic Republic extraordinary power and therefore allows Iran to do what it has not dared to do without alliance with Russia, this source said. Iran is testing Israelis' red lines by arming the radical Shiite Iranian proxy Hezbollah with potentially dire consequences. When Israel is forced to act after Iran and Hezbollah cross all the red lines, Lebanon will be destroyed, because Iran and Hezbollah have turned it into one big weapons storage facility, and the world is silent. As if to throw more coal on the fire, during digs near the Ramat Negev Regional Council, a team of Israeli Antiquities Authority archaeologists discovered a large Byzantine-era structure dating back to the 4th century A.D. You need to note, there are few that still date time saying A.D. They didn't. I did. Now it's CE or BCE. That's the more political phrase. Anyway, inside this particular structure were the remains of wine presses. Now this is all in the southern Negev region, which is located on the ancient incense trade route, a sparsely populated area, a desert area with some 6,000 residents among its kibbutzim, Jewish settlements and such. Former Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion famously retreated there in his retirement. According to the IAA excavation director, quote, the southern Negev is known as an agricultural region which grew grapes for wine that was exported to the far reaches of the Byzantine Empire, end of quote. This is within the territory known as Israel, their traditional lands. And all of this occurred 200 to 300 years before there was even one Muslim on the planet. Jerusalem doesn't belong to them. Of course, Muslims in the region are Arab, and they were also the ancestors of contemporary Arabs. The Bible calls them by a lot of different names. The current term Arab comes from the Arabian Peninsula, but they are made up of many distinct tribal groups, all of which are descendants of Noah's son Ham. One of these groups the Bible calls the Canaanites. We read about them in the Old Testament, descendants of Ham's son Canaan, Genesis chapter 9. Now, we don't use the term Canaanite anymore, assuming that Israel eradicated them some 3,000 or more years ago, but they didn't. Now, a new study suggests the biblical account of the annihilation of the ancient Canaanite people at the hands of the invading Israelites is a little bit premature, claiming their descendants are still living just up the road, right across that fence, right over the Lebanese border. That's right. Lebanese are Canaanite. A new genetic research from Wellcome Trust Sanger Institute has found that far from being destroyed, the Canaanites morphed into the inhabitants of modern Lebanon. Scientists in the United Kingdom Genetic Research Center sequenced the genomes of 5 4,000-year-old Canaanite individuals and compared them to other ancient and present-day populations, including a sample of 99 modern Lebanese. The results, published in July 27th of this year in the American Journal of Human Genetics, shows that there's a 93% possibility, capability, whatever you want to call it, that the ancestry of modern Lebanese are Canaanites. Had they been destroyed by the Israelites when God commanded them to do so, Israel wouldn't be having half the trouble they're having today. According to the study, the Canaanites were the common ancestors of several ancient peoples who inhabited what it was called the Levant during the Bronze Age. Various names: Ammonites, Moabites, even Israelites. The Levant was the ancient name for the Middle Eastern area we now call Israel, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and so forth. Mystery surrounds the fate of the Canaanites, who later came to be known as Phoenicians. as they appear in scant historical records. Although they introduced several innovations into society, including the first alphabet, other than in the Hebrew Bible, where their annihilation is clearly detailed, there are few mentions in ancient Egyptian and Greek texts of this people group. In Deuteronomy 20:16, the ancient Israelites are commanded by God to completely wipe out the several Canaanite peoples after the death of their Hebrew leader Joshua. That didn't happen. In that passage, it talks about the Hivites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites. And while the Canaanite disappeared from Western history, they didn't go away. They simply morphed into obscurity. I believe they're coming back, don't you? I believe that during the Great Tribulation and the final book, I think they're all going to be there, mounting a charge against Israel and Jerusalem. We'll see.